Welcome to the TPC Desktop video series. In this video, we want to take a look at closure settings found in the closure view. I've opened up a survey that has a number of lots in it here, and I'm going to highlight lot 1, select that in the Traverse Manager, then come down and click this option that says delineate that traverse in the drawing. So here's where that traverse is in the drawing. Now let's come in and open that traverse up, and I can see that I started at point 6:1, went a number of courses back to P3 it looks like. And if I look at the coordinates, they're almost identical between starting and end. So I came back to where I started. But I want to jump right into the closure view for this and show you that at the toolbar up here is the closure settings, or I can go edit, closure settings. And I see that Traverse PC has already determined that this is a closed loop. Now it did this through something called the closed loop tolerance. Let's come back up to settings, open up our tolerance tab, and right here is the closed loop tolerance. And it's set at 0.1%. So this says, take a look at my linear error. How close did I come back to where I was? What was the error, the linear error involved in that? And look at that as a percentage of the total length of the traverse. And if that error is very small, it's a closed loop. In this particular case, I say if it's less than or equal to 0.1%, it's a closed loop. So that's how Traverse PC determined that this was a closed loop traverse. I can override that though. Okay, I can tell it's a closed point to point or open or whatever. Now because it's a closed loop, Traverse PC also came in and identified the from and to, so beginning and ending points, and said when I get to this P3 at the end here, that should be the same as the first point, the initial point, 6:1. Okay, so when I look in my closure view, it tells me it's a closed loop, and because it's a closed loop, it computes the area. Now I could just as easily have gone back into the closure settings and said this is a closed point to point. Here's the initial point and the ending point, and this is the correct closing point, 6:1. Okay, and I'd have the same errors, I just wouldn't have an area. So I only get an area if I tell Traverse PC it's a closed loop. There we go. Let's take a look at another traverse in here. I'm using traverse groups, so I can expand the control group, and I'm going to tag this pin set control. And let's just come in and take a look at that. So I've delineated that in the drawing. Look down here in the southwest corner, and I can see I start out and move my way up here, and then eventually close out. So I've set up some control points I can use to stake out these lots. Let's go ahead and open that traverse up. And I can see, sure enough, that I'm using angle sets in here. I'm also using point labels C1, 2, 3 for control point. And if I look down here in my description, just going to slide this over, I can see that I'm closing out on point 37. So I started at a PK, closed out on point 37. So let's jump into the closure view for this and go right to our closure settings. So this is a closed point to point. It didn't qualify as a closed loop based on that closed loop tolerance. So I can come in and say, okay, I started at C1, I ended at C8, and the correct point was 37, and I simply just typed in that point, and Traverse PC recalled it. I also could have entered coordinates if I just had coordinates for some closing point. And that's all Traverse PC needs then to come back and tell me what the linear error was. Now, inside those closure settings, I can also enter a closing angle if I have it. So right now, Traverse PC says, go ahead and put in your closing angle, and it will compute the resulting angle from that. And I can simply come in and put the correct angle in. So I can do a 206, for instance, and I'll have an angular error of 49, or I could have said point dot dot point to recall a bearing between two known points. That would have been just fine. And when I come back then, Traverse PC will tell me that in addition to this relative and linear error, I also have this angular error. And I can adjust that out by balancing angles if I want. So I can come in and use the closed point to point to say I didn't come back to my initial point. I just used two existing points in the project, and I want to close out on those and still have an error report and an opportunity to adjust those errors if I need to.